So first up for you today, we have Matt Barewicz from the Vermont Department of Labor. And Matt is going to talk to you a little bit about himself and his career path. And he's also going to introduce you to some labor market information so you can learn about some of the important details behind the career fields we'll learn about today. Matt, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's excited as we are to be here to share some information. Labor market information is just a fancy term for data that focuses about jobs and the economy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And if people don't mind, I thought I would just share a screen so that I could kind of walk through what I do on a day-to-day basis, but also kind of who I am and where I come from. So hopefully this is coming up. We got a Vermont Career Connect. We're in November 2023. This is a standard slide I use to just thank my federal partners. Though I work for the state of Vermont, for the Vermont Department of Labor, I'm actually funded by the federal government. And I use this in front of every presentation just to kind of give background to who I am, and I'll break this down for you in just a moment. And so what I do for the Vermont Department of Labor is I am an economist. An economist is an occupational title I didn't even know existed when I was your age. I had no idea there was a job called economist. And so one of the things we do is we have a website that's full of data. And this is something that you and your classrooms could visit. It's vtlmi.info, but you can do career exploration where there's going to be videos and descriptions of all the different jobs in the Vermont economy. And also this brochure, which we're going to spend some time with talking about today. And we have some panelists that are going to be highlighting their career paths and how it relates to the brochure. So there's lots of information on our website, and that's really what we're all about. And so I just am so happy that you're all here. You all chose this. Maybe it was your teachers who chose it, but you're here today. And so I think it's important we take a moment to appreciate that you're being here and you're being curious. You're asking questions about jobs, about education. You know, there's no right answer. There's just something that feels right for you. And everyone's answer is going to be different. Everyone's questions are going to be different. And no one has perfect information. And that's why we're all here today to help you try and get the best information you can to make the choices you have about what classes you want to take, what trainings might be interesting to you, and ultimately what jobs might be the most fulfilling and rewarding for you. So let's talk economics. As I said, I didn't even know there was something called economics when I was young, but here, I want to bring this slide back and highlight in yellow. It says the purpose. This is the purpose of my division. I have a whole team, and we do this, is to produce, explain, and disseminate, meaning release, economic data. So we have a team of people that actually compile data from Vermont households, from Vermont businesses, counting how many people are working, what type of jobs they have, like how many cashiers there are in the state of Vermont, how many teachers there are in the state of Vermont. And we also go to businesses and schools and even to the State House, where I'll testify to elected officials to explain this data and talk about it, what it means for the Vermont economy. Because if you take nothing away from today, I hope you take away the fact that there are a lot of job opportunities in the state of Vermont. There's over 600 different occupations in the state of Vermont. Over 600. You just have to find the one that makes the most sense for you. And hopefully through this brochure, we'll be able to kind of cut that search down for you. But even with those 600 occupations, there's lots of different pathways to get into them. And so this is the kind of like the fun of life. You get to choose your own adventure. And so for me, how did it all begin, right? As I said, I didn't even know there was something called an economist when I was young. And so for me, it started here at a grocery store. I worked at a grocery store all through high school. And, you know, I learned a lot through that job. The first thing I learned is that, hey, I'm pretty good at numbers, because even people, when you work in a grocery store, you have to, at that time, know all the codes for fruit, because fruit gets sold by weight. And so each fruit has a different code because you have to charge a different price for it. So I learned quickly while I was on the job that I can memorize these fruit codes very quickly, because my colleagues would ask, instead of looking them up for themselves, they'd just say, hey, Matt, what's the code for peaches? And I yell out 3231, and they go, thanks, and they move on. And so quickly I realized, oh, I'm pretty good at numbers. So I decided to keep going to school. So I went to Essex High School, and then I went to University of Vermont, where I started studying computer science, but I realized I didn't like computer science and switched to economics. But during college, I worked in a mailroom. And there is one numbers that are very important to mailrooms, which are zip codes. And so for a while, I knew like 95% of all the zip codes in the state of Vermont. I used to be pretty fun at parties, just yelling out zip codes to where people's hometown was. I'm not as good as that anymore. I think Bethel, I saw is in the chat, is like 05032. Tunbridge might be 05077. Those are just wild guesses. This was 20 years ago, so you got to give me a break. But I still have all those numbers rattling around in my head. And that's ultimately like what kind of got me to where I was going. Because did I know where I was going? No, I did not. But I kept taking classes. I kept taking jobs that seemed to fit for me. And it kept leading me into the next path and moving on. And I learned some really key things that will always apply to you in your job search. 1, show up on time. 2, work well with others. 3, follow instructions. Those 3 things will make you successful in any career pathway. And in fact, we got those 3 summary points of the skills needed by interviewing Vermont employers. We called 2,000 Vermont employers and said, what are you looking for? They said, we need people who show up on time, work well with others, and follow instructions. And that's very much what your classroom is preparing for you. But before we move on, we're going to switch to some instructions for you right now. We're going to do this quickly so that we can get to the rest of the panel. But your instructions now, if you have your brochure, you can take it out. This is a simple game of choose option A or choose option B, right? And there's only what feels right to you. There's no wrong answer here. And it might be different from your friends. And over time, your answers may change. That's okay. But right now, it's just like you got to kind of go with your gut. What feels right? These are called blink responses. So if you look into the brochure, it's divided up into 4 tables. If we look at just the first 2 tables here, we have, do you like to observe, learn, analyze, or solve problems? So are you kind of like to look at things and solve problems? Or do you like to work with people and use your creativity? Similar, but very different. So you'd have to choose, do you want to learn, analyze, and solve problems? Or do you want to work with people, use your creativity? And these are very general concepts, but it can be illustrated by the occupations in here, the jobs that people have. Would you prefer to be a nurse or a teacher? So just take a second, even in your hands, using hands in your classrooms, you can say, who wants to be a nurse? Hands up. Who would prefer to be a teacher? Hands up. There's no right or wrong answer. And some of these might be both bad answers for you, but that's kind of the fun of the game is you have to choose something. Nurses like to solve problems. Teachers like to work with people. Different example, software developers or photographers. Who wants to be a software developer? Hands up. Who would prefer to be a photographer, doing all that creative stuff? And the last 2 in the brochure are working with your hands to fix, build, make things. The other ones is organized and detailed information, working lots of information. So this gets highlighted by, would you prefer to be a carpenter or a bookkeeper? Would you rather build houses or run the numbers on how much it costs to build that house? Would you prefer to be a plumber or a lawyer? Again, there's no right or wrong answers here, but as you're listening to yourself, even me asking these questions, even if you're not answering in your classroom, just be thinking, I think I'd probably prefer to go that way. The more you're saying, I think I prefer to lean that way, is going to help you narrow down that search. That's those 600 jobs or different types of jobs in the Vermont economy quickly get divided down to 200, 100, 50 possible jobs that you might be interested in. Then once you have it down to that small manageable number, it's easy to start plotting out which classes, what trainings, what other types of jobs might help you in that journey. So I do want to thank you so much for being here. It is going to be a fun morning, and I will turn it back to Kathy.